Hey, what's going on, YouTube? We just got the October monthly bulletin, and I'm actually going to pop up the relevant portion that we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be talking about the Clash of Wills segment in particular. And so here's what it is. And with us to discuss the monthly bulletin for Clash of Wills, we've got resident Clash of Wills expert Sinzar and resident Uber whale Barry here to talk about what this could mean for upcoming Clash of Wills. So I'll let you guys go ahead and say hello.
Oh, I feel like I
Uh,
should be hurt by that.
I feel like I should too. What means just because I'm like an expert in Clash means I can't also be an Uber whale?
Oh, you can definitely be both. I think there are probably people who are both.
I am more than just my willingness to pull for units.
Okay, you're
Goodness.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But I'm glad to have you guys here with me talking about it. So, looking at the monthly bullet, and you can see this in the in-game news. We just got it yesterday. Upcoming this month's next Clash of Wills is a Reaper Stone enemy that has weaknesses to dark, water, and light. And it uses a variety of attacks, which includes physical and dark magical attacks. It buffs itself as well, inflicts charm and stone, and you have to hit its elemental weakness to reduce its defenses, which is something we've kind of seen before, as well as change its attack pattern. And so the question I have for you guys, and we'll talk about this as we go, is just based purely on the information in that bulletin. Who are some of your immediate thoughts that you plan on bringing to the October Clash of Wills?
Tsukiko, the brand new unit that just came out.
Easy.
She will definitely be coming for me again. I have seen a lot of comments from people thinking that because Earth isn't listed on the bulletin, like Tsukiko is all of a sudden just not coming. I disagree with that entirely. I think she will absolutely be on quite a few high score runs next month, even though Earth is not a primary or even a weakness at all. I think Tsukiko will still be coming.
So can you elaborate on that? Like, why you think that's going to be okay, even though that's not part of the listed weaknesses?
Well, for one thing, it seems more and more recently they are just doing everything in their power to like push Chow aside and stop the counter craziness. So, assuming we go again next month where Chow is not going to be like the number one morale pick, your two options are, well, your second and third best options are Kresnik followed by Tsukiko for morale fill. So, not even discussing her damage, Tsukiko is the third best morale battery, the second best if you're not taking Chow. Kresnik does basically morale and virtually nothing else, while Tsukiko can either just do off element damage. She even does have light element damage in her kit, so she can be on element at slightly less than Earth. But like I said, just purely for morale, she's going to be really good for morale fill, and she can still deal respectable damage. And when we talk more about like the actual element itself, I can like go into why Earth can still be completely viable next month as well.
Cool. What about for you, Barry? Because I think I heard you say Tsukiko right off the bat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Earth is her primary element form, but let's not pretend for a second like light and fire aren't still absolutely adequate forms of damage, especially considering that she's an evoke damage unit at the end of the day. Being able to carve away a lot of mitigations just by virtue of having somebody with high evoke damage is pretty much an asset that you can never completely disregard, even if we pretend that the rest of her supporting kit in Clash of Wills doesn't exist. So that being said, I mean, she will be great. I suspect a lot of people who opted out and crowned Yuna will probably use Yuna. The people who want to use Dagger are going to be really sad.
See, I think that's interesting because a lot of the complaints and criticism that I hear about Tsukiko, like, oh, I'm not pulling for Tsukiko because X, Y, and Z, has to do with her being locked to Earth, Fire, and Light. And people saying, oh, well, she's just not going to be valuable outside of that. And in any Clash of Wills that doesn't include those weaknesses. And on the one hand, I can agree, and on the other hand, like, as we have demonstrated with the combined effects of the Imperil fields and her actual Imperil abilities, you can still make an enemy quite weak to the element that, works with those fields and abilities in order to do at least some damage, even if you're off element. So I get where people are coming from. I still think that, like, going crazy trying to get her and max her out is a good move. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who is immediately thinking that, especially in terms of her morale fill, just because it's quite good, quite good.
For sure.
I think it's worth noting too, just because Sinzar's here, they finally gave you a boss week to light for your Knights of Grandshell.
Ooh.
Oh my god, they did, and they're doing it again next month.
And they're doing it again next month.
I just shared to you, Gert, an image. I don't know how viable it is for you to pull it up mid-video. You probably can't. But just, on the topic where you're talking about how she is locked to Earth and you can't use it, I just wanted to mention briefly the fact that currently the boss's primary weakness is dark, listed on the preview, and then water and light on the preview. So I did some calculations of a primary dark team versus a primary earth team.
Okay.
This is even assuming Earth is not as this is with Earth not a weakness, meaning the boss will start off at -30 Dark Resist and plus 85 Earth Resist. -30 Dark plus 85 Earth.
I'm gonna try and pop that up on the screen right now, real quick. There we go. It's a little small, but we can work with it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is calculations for Sky versus a Stone Undead. So on the left side, you've got the boss at -160 Dark Resist after Imperil, with a 45% Amplify for Darkness, because there is no other higher than 45 in the game currently. So this is kind of assuming you're not chasing the brand new unit. And then on the right side, you've got a calculation of Sky versus Earth, assuming a 100% Amplify from Sylvie, and assuming a 170 Imperil from Tsukiko, which would be her 130 plus her 40 field. And here's the damage breakdown. It's nearly identical. It's nearly identical to a dark team because we don't have an AoE dark amper.
Mm-hmm.
The new unit may or may not be, but if you're not pulling for them, you don't have an AoE dark amper because it doesn't exist. So Earth is completely viable because it's nearly the same damage. And when you calculate that's on that Earth team, Tsukiko can also go full force, all of her kit LB damage. It might even, honestly speaking, do more than a dark team with only a 45% Amplify. Let's top that off even further. The only 45 dark Amplify in the game is single target Kryla and AoE premium Dark Fina. These are two units you don't want to bring to Clash of Wills. They're basically dead slots other than the Amplify. So unless you're pulling for whatever brand new unit, and assuming the brand new unit even has a dark amp for the team, like dark is just not where it's at.
Devil's Advocate, doesn't Bulwark technically do a little bit of a dark amp?
He does AoE 30%.
30%.
Now depending on how squishy the boss is, 30% may be all you need.
Right.
But yeah, as far as pure numbers though, like a Earth team off element with Sylvie will absolutely outdamage a 30% on element dark team with Bulwark. And this is assuming that the resistances are the same as it has been. Now the resistances have been the same for like 5 clashes in a row. I don't expect them suddenly, unless they see this video and knee-jerk reaction, they're like, oh, we got to buff the resistance on the wrong element higher.
Yeah.
Which they may. But Earth can be completely viable to go a pure Earth team for your entire team. Like I mean the entire party going Earth.
I dig it. I dig your commitment to looking at those numbers, because that's impressive, I think. Even though it's off element, because so many people, I see it on Discord, I see it in Facebook, I see so many people get so pushed on like, oh, I have to pull for the new unit or I can't do it, and I have to use the right element or I can't do it, or who can I replace this with and that with, and like to know that you could potentially just go with something really strong anyway and do just as well, almost just as well, is kind of neat.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. So let's think about that though. If you were not going to go an Earth team, and we were going to play with the inherent weaknesses of the boss, who are some units that you think you would try and do right now based on killers and their kind of like inherent elements?
Sky, definitely, because she's naturally Reaper.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically a free gear. So she only has to gear for Stone, which is a very easy killer. We've got things like Esther's STMR, Eileen's Hat, We just got news. We just got information in the news for the new Legend of Mana. So if you pull for that, you've got Elazul's TMR for tons of Stone Killer. So that's very easy to gear for a race.
For sure.
So Sky will cap both races very easily with her intrinsic, and she is incredibly high damage as well. Now she's also super squishy. So depending on the boss, she may be a handicap in the end, but depending on the AI, Sky will definitely still be a year and a half later. She's still here.
Yep, for sure. Do you think we'll be seeing a clear that is featuring your all-time favorite unit, Oliveira?
Absolutely. I tested him too on his numbers, and he is pretty high. I forget the exact ones, like third or fourth highest. But again, that's that big disclaimer, depending on the boss's AI. But that's including a double stack of focus from Dark Rain,
right?
His TMR, which, as we saw last month, even though Tsukiko had her True Brave Shift base form, I don't think ever ran a clear where I got a double stack focus in, because the boss just wouldn't allow it because of the mechanics.
Right.
So that's not always possible to do.
How about you, Barry? Who are you thinking?
I mean, it's hard to turn away from the obvious.
Yep.
You know, you get units like Chizuru, who is just gonna come in, shift if you've imbued and amped properly, and just smack regardless of what element you're looking at. But honestly, I can even see some viability for people who want to commit to maybe Starlight Elena in her original form with her intrinsic, just because light is such a prevalent element for her. If they decide that they do want to go the route of a light team and they are potentially capped on what units they have, I wouldn't be surprised at all if I saw somebody do a clear with Starlight Elena as at least a potential chip, because it does list that some of the mechanics are, if you hit with proper elements, it does change attack patterns and lower defenses. So if nothing else, she's good for, just brain walling, tap, repeat every turn and see what happens.
Yeah. Now, my only concern with her, and this has been true of pretty much every fight I try to bring her to, is that unless you're gearing for human and demon, she is just so hard to gear for. And trying to put Reaper and Stone on her, and gear her for everything else she needs, seems like it'd be a lot. But I definitely could see that.
It's worth a try, if nothing else. I mean, just for maybe not your primary clear, but a sub clear just as options. But I mean, herein lies part of my problem with Clash of Wills, is when you have the units that are quote meta units, it's hard not to just use them. I mean, you could even, if you're really looking for, if again running a light team, Ling still has an AoE light imbue, and she still has an AoE Reaper killer, which are very useful regardless of how far removed she is at this point. And she can be a morale battery, albeit less than some of the units we've gotten recently. But it's not a bad alternative.
Right.
Same thing with maybe Bryavia's shifted form.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that, because she can do some good stuff with Reaper, and so can Roberta. Roberta doesn't have Reaper, but she has Stone Killer in the kit, just like Chizuru does. And so I could definitely see either of them, and especially since they're element flexible, making their way into some teams. I personally would also love to see Ibarra just come in, able to stack up with Dark Rain's TMR and just unload a massive hit on your cap turn with her morale-based shifted LB. Like, I would just love to see it.
And you mentioned Barry intrinsic for Elena. Speaking of that, last month we had the intrinsic for Napi, which was very clearly supposed to be used against that clash because it had Demon Fairy Killer for Napi. She's an Earth DPS. So do you think there's going to be a new intrinsic for a new unit this month that is intended for Demon or Stone Reaper?
I mean, if we look at this objectively, it's Halloween, it's been a year, you're looking at both dark and water element, and of course Carton is the first one that comes to mind.
Yep.
I think it's an opportunity missed, maybe not in the first week of Clash, because it might dissuade people from pulling for the unit, and they will just surprise it on us in the second week, where I have to kind of, in the back of my head, think Regina would probably be coming out. But I would see it as a largely missed opportunity not to give Carton an intrinsic that is specifically for this Clash of Wills because God forbid they put themselves in another situation where Carton is just the Oko king for another 6 months.
Well, and I think it's interesting because Stone and Reaper was the races for last year's Halloween Clash of Wills, and it also had dark weakness, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just really interesting knowing that the same racial and at least somewhat element combination is coming out when we have a unit like Carton. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people pulling Carton and blowing off the Dust Bunnies to get him back into some teams as well, especially if there's an intrinsic ability that comes out. And you're absolutely right. That would be probably a big missed opportunity. I think a lot of people would probably skip Nappies just thinking because it's Nappy, but like Carton people would buy for.
Yeah, especially if there's any semblance of the lasting power that he had initially. I mean, upon release, with how Neovisions has been as a meta time period, for a unit to last as long as Carton lasted, DPS wise, both in terms of numbers and ability to just absolutely neuter any fight that we have, it's really impressive. And I do suspect that we see people who already have EX3 Carton potentially completely disregarding the new unit if we knew in advance that the intrinsic was coming. Hence why I would suspect that we see a week 2 of Clash of Wills intrinsic as opposed to week 1.
Sure. Cool.
I hope so.
Are we missing anybody else that we want before we move on to our next question?
I guess I could just mention that, if you do the whole off-element Earth team, Sylvie also brings a 250 Stone Killer, which is pretty high.
Yeah, that is very valuable. Stone fighting enemies or stone buffing units are definitely less common than others, so that's important to note. Cool. So let's ask this question then, because it's worth thinking about, and this is a fun game that a lot of people play in the Discord I've seen. Based purely on the monthly bulletin, and again, that's saying, Dark Water Light Reaper Stone, who do we think that the new unit could be?
Since I'm gonna let you go first.
I'll tell you who I would love it to be, and that is Lucius, because I love Lucius's sprite. I think he's super cool. I also think he was pretty much useless every time he has come out, including every upgrade he has gotten.
Right.
So this would be a chance to just ditch the old Lucius, say the NVA, the original, just the lost cause. Let's start over and try it again, and give me from fresh, newly designed with the latest unit designers, a unit on the power level of Chizuru. Give me that awesome Lucius, and I would be in love. Give it to me.
You just want to bring the double-handed fist meta back.
That would not be the worst thing, because I pulled Wilk. I've got Wilk's STMR, and Wilk himself is just not seeing use these days, and I could at least get something out of that.
Unfortunate. But yeah, that would be cool. Lucius would be a cool one. What do you think, Barry?
So I have my stretch hope, and then I have a more realistic potential idea. My stretch hope was that they take this opportunity in Halloween to release the new Fundamental Forces unit as a warrior of a purple crystal, and make it some kind of, gothic, spooky-esque someone. That just seems like such a stretch, of course, because that would implicitly mean that a Fundamental Forces unit, which would in theory have a CGLB just like the rest of them do, would be a limited time unit, which I just don't see them doing
Like
from a
Ibarra?
business model. Like Ibarra, but she was not a Fundamental Forces unit, whereas all of the rest of them have been permanent. I still have this voice in the back of my head, and I know we just talked about this, that Gaudria is not that big of a stretch. As I'm going back and looking through her kit, she does have a Reaper Killer in her kit that she can give. She does have Dark Imbue that she can give in her kit. She does have Water that she can do in her kit. So it's simply a matter of then switching Ice over to Light and making her more of perhaps a spiritual counterpart to Carton, which, they never gave us any lore, so who's to say that that wasn't what was intended in the first place? But just looking at the kit in general, I can't say I'd be too surprised if they swap one element and then just reskin.
It's been something similar has been done. I mean, Sylvie lost an element and then just became absurdly good. So, you know, I think
they did it for Tsukiko. She was literally the Shrine Maiden of Water, and then all of a sudden re-release just Water MIA.
Yep. It's like, by the way, here's your fire unit.
Earth.
I thought I went about this in kind of a similar way. I went ahead and looked at the unit popularity poll, and I'm gonna go ahead and pop that up on the screen here. So like I say this because, you know, obviously some units have been chosen. You know, Chizuru got ranked. You know, she was chosen #1, and then we obviously got, you know, upgraded Advanced Neovision's Chizuru. But a lot of these other units that are on here are not necessarily ones that we've seen upgrades and updates for, but these are definitely popular units. And as I'm looking through, you know, just purely, you know, what's here, I don't see any that really stand out to me as far as like ones that would get picked, with the exception of Cleome. And I say that because she's got a dark thing going on and she's got Reaper Killer going on, but my one issue with that is that she's not strictly, you know, a global exclusive unit, but neither was Chizuru. Now Chizuru was the fan pick, but like I guess it's possible that it could be done. Like, you know, they could take a unit that came from the other side and just like make her global version. You know, I guess it's possible. I think this is as unlikely as Godria though. Just because Godria was, you know, ridiculously unpopular. But I, you know, outside of these, I can't really think of anything else that really stands out like this will be the unit that they make into the next one. I don't know. What do you think about Cleome?
Go for it, Barry.
Okay. Full disclosure, #8 is still who I voted for. Zenaida will always be my top pick of everyone who needs a new unit in global, period. Cleome I could see. Too. I mean, she's kind of that, you know, dark swordsman idea. I think the fact that she lacks the initial elemental versatility, and who's to say that it's not literally just a reskin Chizuru with the same weapon type with just different elements. I think that would potentially be the biggest dissuader in thinking that it could be Cleome. However, right next to her, we could get our millionth iteration of a Fina. Yeah. Right? Because you had Seabreeze Fina who had water. Obviously, you have Fina and regular Dark Fina, which would be all three relevant elements to this particular type. I would almost think that, you know, another spooky Fina would be more likely than potentially anything else.
I agree. Now, I tell you who I would love to see is like extreme Blackguard Sylvie coming with water, dark.
That'd be amazing.
And water and dark support, but, you know, probably not going to happen.
Dark Knight Sylvie.
Dark Knight Sylvie.
It'd be cool.
Would be cool. Cool. Well, you've now heard it. You've heard what some ideas about who some of our predictions could be. So that's going to lead us into our last question of discussion. It's actually two questions. I'm cheating here. You know, so what are some of you guys' opinions of how our new first season of this year's Clash of Wills bosses have been? And what are you hoping goes the same or different in the next 3 months of Clash of Wills?
Okay, well, for me, we talked about this briefly in advance. So it's kind of like a really polarizing viewpoint depending on where you are for the previous bosses, and especially the most recent boss, Giorgiorno. So there's on the one hand, the person that is all in for Clash of Wills, always pulls the Clash of Wills units, and they have a wide variety of options, meaning you have access to the meta picks. In that case, I think Giorgiorno was an amazing boss. It was very, very challenging. It had interesting AI. It was dangerous to your party. It was hard to damage cap. It had a lot of, like, you know, big, you know, struggles for the fight, which is good because it makes it interesting and fun, and it was awesome. I think Giorgiorno was top tier design. On the other hand, you've also got players who are like, you know, maybe they like Dark Visions a lot too, and they split their pulls between maybe like a top tier Dark Visions unit like Titus and then they skip some of the Clash of Wills units. Maybe they don't have Sylvie and they couldn't afford Tsukiko. So if you didn't have the meta picks, Giorno went from like a challenging, fun fight to a virtually or maybe actually impossible to rank 1 fight if you didn't have both Sylvie and Tsukiko. I don't know that I saw a single team that got rank 1 without either at least one of those units on the party. It may not have happened because it's tuned so heavily for the meta units. And if you have them, it's a great right on target challenge. And if you don't have those meta units, it becomes so challenging to the point it becomes frustrating and it becomes not fun anymore. And that's kind of I don't really have a good answer how to fix that, because on the other hand, let's say they tune it without those meta units in line. Well, all of a sudden, players that had the meta units are going from a fun fight to a face roll fight, and it's too easy. So there's really like no great solution here. Do you tune it for the top end and make it fun for top end players, or do you tune it for like mid tier and make it a joke for top end players, and then all of a sudden we're back in Dark Visions?
Right.
So I don't know.
See, I'm glad you said it like that. Garrett, it's something that you and I spoke about in that State of the Game video from a little while back. As time has gone on, Global has created a deeper and deeper chasm between the player base who likes Dark Visions and the player base who likes Clash of Wills. And it becomes nigh on impossible to really coalesce those two unless you're willing to throw ludicrous amounts of money at this game, especially considering what the pull rates are. To that point, then, you really do, as these clashes have gone on, have to focus exclusively almost on Clash of Wills with your pull if you're going to be able to continue to rank 1 these fights. And Giorgio, oh my god, I can't say it anymore. The last one, Kappa Boy, was an incredible fight. It really was. I think mechanically, it was probably one of, if not the best fights that they've ever given us ever, short of potentially, Lightning Tyrant. However, if you want to rank 1, once they started to put 50% HP locks, once they started to change the attack patterns, once they started to have these ridiculous RNG counters that come with it that absolutely smack, and if you don't have, either a counter-built Sylvie or some means of one-and-done re-raises and 3 different sources of guts per that you include, it gets more and more difficult. And then you add in the morale requirement to rank 1, which forces you to have effectively been rank 1 in almost every single Clash of Wills prior, so that you can even have the Clash of Wills equipment to make sure that you keep building. And then they throw that stupid staff that I still haven't done for Morgana, and all of it just becomes a game in and of itself.
Yep.
And in that sense, it's an incredible addition to what Global is doing. However, the divide between where Clash of Wills is and where Dark Visions is getting wider by the moment, to the point that you have to decide.
Yep. And I think that's where a lot of people, even people who like Clash of Wills, fall down on whether or not they were going to pull for Tsukiko, for example. Like, because, a unit like Chizuru, who's got an elemental affinity, but very much so was not necessary for her boss. Like, that one could be very easily have been beaten. Same with Olive. People know that they're good and flexible, and you could use them for all kinds of things. But then you've got Tsukiko coming in with the very clear element focus for 3 different elements, technically, but very clearly, and locked to it because she's a mage. And people who want to pull on, for example, Nier, we're saying like, well, I can't do both. I can't throw all my Lapis at Tsukiko, no matter how good I know she is, if I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, unless I'm going to spend, and I'm not a spender, so I'm not going to do it. Like, and I hate that. I like that, people can decide sometimes, okay, I'm going to skip this time because I don't need the unit and they are not necessary for the clear. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it. But like I do feel like between like Chizuru's fight, Olive's fight, and Tsukiko's fight, like they are very clearly they've got harder and harder and harder. And like it was very clear like you need Tsukiko if you're gonna do this well. Easily. Not well, easily. Which is a shame, I think, for some players and a boon for other players. But like definitely the first two compared to the last, which is true of pretty much every season. The last boss of the season is usually the hardest. But this one felt really out of place.
It was the whole evocation thing.
Yeah.
It's just like the whole boss was literally designed for you to bring evokers as your primary or even only damage dealers because of the whole mitigations and the phase swapping and the mitigations like get twice as strong in phase 2. It's like you really needed to bring an evoker. And the issue was like there are no alternatives. Like there's kind of sort of Yuna, but even then she's not great because of her really terrible trance shift. It makes her very awkward to use. And other than Yuna, like the next best evoker is dbarry doing like 5% of Tsukiko's damage, and that just doesn't work. You need options. That's why, like you mentioned, Chizuru and Olive's clashes. Chizuru and Olive definitely meta picks for those clashes, but those were just good damage dealers. We had alternatives. There is no good alternative to a evocation locked fight. Well, not locked, but an evocation skewed fight.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, let's talk about Fry's Clash of Wills. You didn't even need her.
Nope.
Yeah.
And that's almost the complete polar opposite of the ones like Maeve, who was almost absolutely you had to have her for her clash, and you have not spoken her name since. So I think they did this clash specifically to sell Tsukiko, which, okay, fine. Unless they're giving us future evoker damage dealers, which I mean at this point, based off of what we know, barring like you said a dbarry reskin or a Morgana reskin, I don't see happening. I don't think any will be quite like this, which means we can go back to that concept of laterally shifting your team composition to fit the demands of the fight. It might get a little ugly, and I hope that they don't do any more fights where they put crazy attacks on timers, like a turn 8 AoE death unavoidable situation again. But that being said, I mean, I get it. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was out of place, but yeah, exactly so. It was tuned for an evoker.
One thing that I do think was really cool, though, and this is a comparison to the very first season of Clash of Wills we had, where in the second fight, if you had Skye, all you had to do was just like build a team that could support Skye doing what she needed to do, and you were going to get rank 1. I feel like in a lot of ways, if you had Runda, which everybody has Runda, and if you had Tsukiko, all you had to do was just like bolster them up to let them do their thing, and you were going to be okay. I did think that was nice. Because that does make it kind of flexible. You could bring whatever chainers you want that we're just going to allow Tsukiko to cap, and there you go. But yeah, I don't know, kind of neat.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this is a new season now, right?
Yeah, we're starting a new season this month.
Usually, the first fight of a new season is a cupcake. However. And I do have to, as excited as I am about Nier, and as much as I love that franchise, and as many hours as I put into Automata, the fact that they have carrot dangled for this long the knowledge of this Nier collab, and we have no idea if they are going to be general content tuned, if they're DV tuned, if they are Clash of Wills tuned, has really set the player base up to, we've stockpiled this lapis for X amount of time to save for Nier. And if they're not what you were hoping for and not what you expected, you might have just passed on so many units that you may have really wanted to pull, but didn't because of this, magic floating spaghetti monster in Nier that you have no idea if they're even what you're looking for.
Yep. There's a guy who comes in my stream every week, Jonathan, you know who you are, who tells me
Uh-huh.
how much lapis he has at the start of the video. And he's always like, this week he was like, I'm at 106,000, and I'm just like, oh, you're missing you're missing everything, my dude. Like, pull on some units, play the game. But like, that's kind of what he wants to do, because he really wants to get into that, pull for those units when they eventually show up. And I hope they're good. I hope that people aren't passing up too much.
I will say this, that Global makes a lot of mistakes in a lot of ways, but the one thing Global does great is unit design, and they are definitely in touch with what their players like and what their players pull for. So I think that Global original units that are designed from the ground up for Global are most likely going to be intended for Global content. So if they came out and didn't have morale skills, I would be incredibly blown away shocked. I think they will definitely have morale skills because they are going to be for Global. And if they didn't, there's going to be, of course, the near fanboys, which are going to pull no matter what. And then, but there's going to, on the other hand, you're going to have people that are like, well, these aren't class units. Why are we pulling for DV? Big skip. And it's going to hurt their bottom line. So I think there's a very high chance that these have morale skills, and they're probably going to be great in DV as well, because Nier is just like really hype, and they want them to be the big sellers. So I think this could be likely.
I think so too. I have this reluctance because considering they had to go back and retune every single Festa unit that they delayed for forever until the Neovisions era. So, your Ignis, your Cacterias, and they made them more Clash of Wills viable. And then a few months later, after release, they already had to change Esther to make her more viable. I have this potentially irrational voice in the back of my head saying just to be careful with your expectations, because we've seen them, as in touch as they are sometimes, we've watched literal fan-designed units become completely irrelevant faster than almost any other unit I've ever seen, except for, Maeve.
That is true. So who's been using Tiana lately?
Exactly so.
Well,
you know what I mean? And, do you really use Fry outside of niche clears?
All right,
No.
this is true. So I guess I kind of went, a little bit too much in the praise for the unit design. They definitely still do some misses.
So I just be careful.
Yeah.
Especially if they have plans right now to do a week 2 Carton intrinsic.
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, last year we got Oliveira and then Carton the next week after, so...
Yes, we did.
Dicey situation. So what are some things we hope go different or the same in the next season? I'll go first. I hope that when Christmas comes, that Tiana gets a complete redesign.
Yes, absolutely. She needs it. Mostly, honestly speaking, I think if they just cut the stacking down and gave her just a mod boost, that's all she needs. Her overall kit is fine. She's got some nice support stuff. It's just the fact that she stacks for 22 turns, and even after that, it's still bad damage. I mean, who cares about her support kit, because you're just not going to use that. So if they just quadrupled the modifiers and cut the stacking in half, she'd all of a sudden be a good unit.
I would also love for them to not make her morale-based LB do 5 elements worth of damage.
Yep. That was my next thing.
Because
make it an imbuable hit.
There's only 12 elements, so almost half of them are going to be immune, and you can't use it.
Mm-hmm. Truth.
Anybody else?
I would like to see not just reskinned Clash of Wills gear. I think that is one of the reasons why Clash of Wills is such great content, is because the rewards feel worth it, right? But I would love to see them step completely outside of what they're thinking right now, and let's get, I don't know, a Clash of Wills materia that has auto morale generation and maybe Omni Killer on it. Let's just say that the morale is standard because it's on every piece of everything they've ever made, right? But Omni Killers, or Chain Cap, or Crazy Double Hand, or Flat Stats, or something that would make it feel worth a materia slot. Or take it one step further and let's get a Vision card that is specifically Clash of Wills focused, that is like a cool smile, but slightly different for the people who potentially skipped on a cool smile and didn't realize that that is the reason why they could justify making Tidus's STMR stay exactly the way that it was.
Yeah.
For me, I would like some more interesting stuff in the obnoxious shop or whatever they're called per season. It's kind of strange to say that because on the one hand, just like the drop shop even existing is super amazing and generous. There's like nothing like that on the JP server. The fact that you can literally pick 2 free Neos of choice every season plus more for free, that's amazing. But recently, more and more, and this may be like a I pulled too much problem, the units have been just useless for me. They've got good units, but I don't need any of them. So I'll like grab both materia, and then I've got like 7,500 drops to like spend on a 10+1 ticket. I would much rather have more interesting things to buy in the shop for a player that doesn't need the units. If you need the units, it's a top tier addition. But if you don't need the units, you'll get like a new killer materia, which is sure, but not anything super interesting. So I'd love to have things like unique, like for example, something on the lines of like this may upset people, like the reflect ring, something that is a complete.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
I don't mean the reflect ring literally, but I mean something like that is completely unique and build changing and strategy changing that you can build your team around. That kind of stuff, I love that kind of stuff. So I would love to see more things like that. Like maybe something that after we just had the Riku stuff, this is not going to happen, but something that like gave a unit cover for 1 turn that they could click. So I could put something like on Sylvie and she could have like a 1-turn magic cover on a 10-turn cooldown from an item. That'd be amazing, but with the Riku stuff, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
That will never happen.
I have on occasion used the special ability that the Dancer's Diadem gives, but very, very rarely. So I would also like to see like useful, unique, like strategy properties on some of these items or abilities. That'd be so cool.
I mean, in Dark Visions, an AoE 80% all element resist is incredible. That will undoubtedly find its place in time.
Did they change it to AoE? It used to be single target.
It's single, yeah.
Oh, is it?
In fact, I think it's self-only.
If you have Omni cover, that's still fine. Jekt exists. So does Zhao. That's fine. I also can't, along those same lines, I mean, I wouldn't hate them using the Obnixis shop as an opportunity for intrinsics. If they're going to make us spend resources on it, that's not a bad place. Since all of these intrinsics seem to go to units that are Clash of Wills focused, why not?
That's an absolutely wonderful suggestion. If they added, for example, once per season, one of those permanent intrinsic tickets that I could use to like buy Napi, I'd probably do that. Like I definitely did not spend 12K on Napi's janky intrinsic.
Nope.
But if I could spend 5,000 obnoxious drops, I'd do it for the fun factor, just because I want to use more units.
Yeah, especially if you don't need the units. Like this time I ended up picking Maeve just because I've never pulled a Maeve in my entire time playing the game. But I'm not like you guys, so I have to be smart with what I grab out of shops and stuff. But like that would be super nice, super nice. Awesome.
Or like crowns, mystery crystals. Why not? Things that are actually valuable to. Forgive my position, but like players who have a lot of things.
Yeah. I think newer players or players who are just starting out, like there was a time when she was in the shop and I used mine to get my Ling to EX3, same thing with when Kresnik was in the shop. But for players who already have them or could benefit from other things, it'd be nice just to have the option. All right. Anything else we're hoping to see the same or different?
Just the challenge of the bosses. I think that the last one we talked about was too evocation focused, but overall I'm enjoying Clash of Wills design, and I just want to see them keep going because something that especially in the JP server, the developers seem to like have a knee-jerk reaction when a hard boss comes out. The community gets upset, and the next boss is a complete throwaway joke. You're going to see this with the Cerberus trial coming up on Global soon because the Rafflesia came out in JP. It was a bad trial in JP, and then the next one is a complete free win. And so hopefully, because people were struggling on Giorno, I don't want the October boss to be just a walk-in and the Exterminator. was a complete throwaway Clash of Wills boss.
Mhm.
I don't want to see that.
Right.
That's true.
I hope that it looks really, really spoopy, whatever it is. So that'll be fun. All right, guys.
I will take this opportunity
Yeah.
to at least commend the boss design from a sprite perspective, because every single sprite for Clash of Wills bosses has been in its own way absolutely incredible. So that is one thing they've done right, and I hope they continue to do that right, because I really hope we never just see reskinned old bosses. Like if I see a Hill Gigas Clash of Wills boss, I'm going to be so disappointed, because you get, you know, a whole Clash of Wills boss that you then change for April Fools to look derpy, and then you just reskin it a
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VI Hill Gigas. Come on, that would be so disrespectful.
Mine would be the final boss of Item World if they reskinned that one to be a fourth color set. That would be a big slap. Yeah.
Is that the Surging Demon or something? Is that what it is?
Of unknown origin.
Ah, yes, of unknown origin, of course.
Of course. Alrighty. Well, we've talked about it. We've talked about ways we might get ready for this month's class and what we hope it looks like. I want to thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me and talking about it, because it was just kind of a spur of the moment idea I had this morning, and you all stepped up, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you being part of our community.
Been fun.
Glad to be here.
All right. Well, guys, we'll see you in the next video, whatever that looks like, and be good to each other. Take care and have a good rest of your weekend.
There.